Rise and shine, it's a brand new day. Ken can take the stage, ready to play. Weekdays at 10, the cars in the scene. Coffee in hand, they're living the dream. Aggression in the voice, got the whole town awake. Bringing fire to the mic, make no mistake. Shows in the corner, spitting out facts. Dropping truth bombs, ain't holding back. Ken in the morning, feel the heat. From 10 a.m. CST, can take a seat. Live and love that break in the mind. Ken and the world. Light up your speakers, crank up the sound. They're talking about life upside down. Opinions exploded like a sonic blast. In the studio, they're built to last. With passion and grit, they engage and ignite. Every single week, they're a force can't fight. From sports to politics,
This is a Huddle Sports Network broadcast. You can find us on Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Facebook, and of course YouTube. Get all your...
Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Ken and Ken in the morning. Good morning, Ken. How you doing?
Oh, not too bad today. How about you, buddy?
You know, surviving another day. Gotta get the cam up here and work in a second as I continue sending this out to X. But had a question we haven't talked about yet. Expansion, NFL expansion. What do you think? I figured we'd start there today.
I mean, there's a lot of states that have been clamoring for teams for a while. And if you add a new division to each conference, you'd relatively make it mathematically easy. But we've seen with some of these expansion teams, it takes a while before they're any good. Granted, you do have the ones that catch fire right away, but I don't know how well that's going to play out, because part of what you hear is them trying to go for one for like St. Louis again and all that, when we've tried that multiple times and it hasn't worked.
So I'm not so sure I'm sold. There we are. Good morning, everyone. I'm not so sure I'm sold on stateside expansion as far as cities like St. Louis that, you know, look, they had the Cardinals, they moved to Arizona, the Rams moved there, you know, were there for what, about 20 years and then moved back to the LA. We've had San Diego move up to LA. So now they don't have a franchise. You know, some cities like Louisville, can make arguments for it. Oklahoma City could make arguments for it. I don't think that's where the NFL is going in the immediate short term in terms of expansion. I think they're looking across the pond, 5 to 6 hour flight from New York or Philly. I think they're looking at London. I think they're looking at expanding the footprint outside of the lower 48, if you will. I don't know if that means expansion as far as to the current NFL roster or its own league or a hybrid.
I was going to say, as its own league, I think that'd be a hell of a lot better. But if it's to where, you know, we're just going to shoehorn these guys in immediately, I don't know how well that's going to work. I think you should expand it like your North American other countries like Canada and Mexico first.
Canada is a non-starter because they have the CFL. Canada is a non-starter.
I was going to say the NFL is already massively popular over there. And it's not like the CFL is extremely popular.
They don't want to go to a place where they're competing with something in the market. So if the NFL were to go to Canada, they're competing with the CFL. They don't want to have competition. They want to own the battle space, if you will. Good morning, Motown. Good morning, Luca. Good morning, Joe. We haven't talked about the European expansion a little bit because you look at what the NFL is doing. They start out with just games in London, which, by the way, always sell out. Then 4 years ago, and now 5 years ago, when this season comes up, the first post was a misfire. There's the actual. But then they added Germany, right? A couple games there. Then they added Brazil. Now they're adding Ireland and they're adding Spain this season. and then they're looking at France and Italy. So I think they're setting a table for another NFL Europe per se, but they're setting the table for that because NFL Europe didn't work. Why didn't it work? Well, there was no homegrown talent in Europe. So, the fans were rooting for a bunch of guys who couldn't make NFL rosters, kind of like a NFL D League, if you will, or G League. Well, I am, Luca. Even Ken is maybe old enough to remember that.
Yep.
But
I remember it. Yeah, it wasn't a great success.
It didn't work because there was nothing homegrown. It was just a bunch of kids from Alabama and Texas and Illinois and California that didn't make rosters. And we sent them over to play in Europe for a couple games and tried to replicate the NFL with less than talent and nothing really homegrown in those markets. And we still, and look, we did see some fruits of that in the NFL. There have been a couple players that are products of the NFL Europe that, were American-born players that went and played there, and actually made it to the league, and some coaches that did as well. And there's some talent from Europe that came because of that, but very few and far between. But I think their approach this time is a little bit different, as you can see by them modeling with more NFL games in Europe. Yeah, Morten Andersen was one. There are a couple others. But the NFL is trying to get, put a bigger footprint in Europe and Africa, right? And I think the way they're going to start when they expand, I don't know. Last year I was like, well, they're going to put teams in Germany and England and add a team to the NFC and the AFC East, right? And that makes sense because of travel for the East. Our travel time for those divisional games is less, right? But now I think it's more of a hybrid. I think what they're going to do is you're going to end up where from week 1 till about week 15, there's going to be an out-of-country game every week at some point. That might be 3 or 4 years down the road. But I think they're building it. We're not going to see something there for maybe 5 to 10 years. But we're going to see the NFL increase its footprint every year by a game or two. And so basically – from week 1 till about week 15 or so, there's going to be a game in Europe or out of the continental U.S. every week.
Yeah, I don't think that's too bad. What I will question is the NFL doing so well over there because it's kind of a novelty, not like it's a joke or something, but you only get a limited time thing with it. Versus if they have actual teams there, are you going to be able to fill those stands week in and week out?
I think that's why you're seeing a slower roll because what do we got, like 8 games in Europe this year?
Yeah, right? I was going to say there's a good amount there.
We've gone from like 1 to 2 to 4 to 6, and now we're up to about 8 or so. And now you've got Minnesota doing a first back-to-back games in Europe. Well, not a first because Jacksonville does it all the time in England, but they're playing 2 different weeks in 2 different countries. That's a first. So they keep, the NFL keeps adding a little bit more to this European or international game slate. And the Sao Paulo thing is cool. The Brazil thing in week 1 is kind of cool. But that's like the kind of like side project over there. The main focus is Europe because they dominate the European marketplace for a couple reasons. One, there isn't professional football, American football over there. 2, there's a lot of Americans over there that live there because of bases in Germany and Spain. You got a base in Rota. You've got U.S. bases in Italy, in England. So there's some of that. You've got people, U.S. forces, for NATO that live in the NATO complexes. And so there's American service members that live there. And then there's just Americans in general that live there who go to games. And that's what the novelty piece, Ken. If it was novelty, they wouldn't be able to have as many games in England sell out as they do. I think we're past the novelty phase because 1 game a year is novelty. Now they're playing, 4 games a year in London, and they all sell out, and then they're going to play 5, and then they're going to play 6. And as long as they keep selling them out, I would say it's not a novelty anymore.
So the thing that I was thinking about this is that, like, Europe is a really large untapped resource. I mean, soccer has already tapped it, right? Like, have you ever seen soccer get? No, I'm talking to Ken, the Packer fan. Have you ever seen European soccer crowds?
Nope.
Like,
well, kind of. Never watched the actual games of it, but I've seen the crowds in that.
Dude, like, they have literal soccer riots where people die. Like, they're that passionate about soccer, dude. Like, they're that passionate. Like, soccer is life, right? So I get what the NFL is trying to do. Like, it takes time for the European market to understand, like, because the perception of American football is that it's just a bunch of big old meatheads, like, slamming into each other. But they're trying to show them the nuance of football, like the athletic skill that it takes, like, you know, the toe taps and the diving catches, and they're trying to show them, like, the really athletic plays, and so that they can, you know, once they have an understanding of that, I think you're going to see, like, the fandom grow in Europe really a lot, because they'll realize it's not just, you know, 2 teams full of steroided up meatheads, like, slamming into each other. There's actually, like, there's strategy to this game. There's, you know, there's athletic ability that's required. There's, you know, all these things. And I think the NFL could really help itself by not just, like, having more games over there, but you're a multi-billion-dollar a year, and, you know, not franchise, but organization. Why not sponsor Pop Warner leagues over there and just start the kids young? Like, get them involved.
That's kind of where they're going, though, with the Play 60 and the flag football. And let me just throw this out here for Ken. This is Bayern Munich Stadium, Allianz Arena. Now, what you see there, all the writing on the side there and up at the top there, where you see the Bayern Munich crest, and you can see in the seats closest, there's painting on the seats, all done by the fans. The fans did that to the stadium, right? Not the club, not the organization. The fans did the Mia San Mia on the side. They did the big Bayern Munich crest. The fan club did that. Not the ownership, nothing. That's how they are about. And you go to any football stadium in Europe, right? Any soccer stadium there, and you will see that Paris Saint-Germain has their emblem on the. You know, you see it in the stadium. You see it in all these stadiums. The fan bases are just so, like Joe said, entrenched. The riot stuff hasn't really happened since the 80s, 90s, the hooliganism, stuff like that in British soccer. But they live and they breathe these clubs, right? So for us to get in there for football, we got to kind of create that culture. And they're doing that slowly. And Luca is saying that they do sponsor leagues in Europe, and they do. They're doing it, like, through the Play 60 flag football. Remember, I said last week? It's the entry level drug. It's low cost to play flag football. You just need the flag kits, right? Which you don't need to buy the nice ones with the Velcro. You can make your own. We used to do it in high school and grade school all the time, right? When we were kids, we'd take little rags and tuck them into our waistbands, right, to play flag. So you don't need much. You just need a football, some flags, and a field to play on, and they've got fields. So
but I think they should invest in tackle football, at least, like, maybe it's in high schools, like, you know.
And we had NFL Europe, Mitch. You're old enough, Mitch. You should remember NFL Europe. It didn't work, and it didn't work because of the way they did it. I think they learned from that, and they're trying to do that again, maybe, Mitch, but it's a different approach. And they're putting more and more games in Europe. Now, here's the problem, though, right? Before I shoot it back to you, Ken, here's the problem. They're playing all these NFL games in Europe, right? And right now we've got like 8 this year, I think, right? Next year it might be 9 or 10, and you're getting this high-level NFL football. And if you're going to start your own league, it's not going to work per se, because the talent level is going to be a massive drop. You're going to go from watching Patrick Mahomes against Joe Burrow to two guys who can't make to basically UFL football. Two guys who couldn't make the NFL and now are in the UFL. That's what you're watching. And the fans aren't stupid. They'll notice that drop off. It's like watching the first team and then watching the second team in soccer. There's a massive difference there, and the fans are going to know. So I'm wondering what they're going to do. I think you're gonna see Pop Warner type stuff like Joe's saying. You're gonna see flag football because that's the gateway to get them to start playing it, and it'll move into Pop Warner and that. So I'm wondering if the NFL is just going to be content with going, okay, we're not going to put two teams there and put them in the NFC and AFC East, but we're going to give them football 16 weeks a year in Europe with NFL teams, right? And that's going to be the model we're going to use until they're clamoring, we want our own teams in a decade or so, by which time we've been playing flag football. We've started sponsoring Pop Warner. There are kids and athletes coming through the system who are NFL caliber, ready to play, and they want to play in Europe.
Yeah, that I think is going to be the best solution to it. Is you're going to have to seed it into their minds there with the Pop Warner and all that shit, and let them develop into football players. And then once you do bring out the league, I would suggest doing it kind of like how the AFL and NFL was for a bit there, to where they're two separate leagues, but at the end of it, you have the winners of the league, the divisions, something like that, play games against each other. That way, you can kind of start hyping it up to where you're going to eventually combine.
Well, you got to be careful though, because if you have a European NFL team play against even like Carolina and they get whooped, and Carolina is not a good team right now, right? And they get whooped, that's going to do more harm than good.
Well, I was going to say the NFL was beating the AFL until you had the magic of freaking Joe Namath.
Yeah, but that's going to take time though to get where those games are even be worth watching. Because right now you could take what was the worst team in the NFL last year?
The Titans.
Yeah.
The Titans? Okay, you take the Titans against the UFL champions. Who wins that game?
Yeah. But, that there's also, like, I don't disagree with you, Ken. Like, it's not going to be competitive for a while. But there's always that, like, European fans, especially soccer fans, are wild about not just soccer, but they're wild about rivalries. And so if you can if you can trigger their pride and get that rivalry thing going, like if I'm the NFL, I might go in there and lay down one year and let them win just so we can be like, hey, we got a rivalry going. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
like,
here's the other problem.
That's good for business.
But Joe, here's the other problem. So NFL Europe, remember they put they put teams in cities like across Europe, like what, 7, 6, 8 teams in Europe, right? Like, like 1 or 2 in England, 1 or 2 in Germany, whatever. That didn't work because it became like national teams, but they weren't national teams because no one was from those countries. I don't know if they want to go to like an NFL Europe model where you have a team in Munich, a team in Berlin, a team in London, a team in Paris. I don't think they want to do that. I think they want to go to, there's a league in England, there's a league in Germany, there's a league in Spain, there's a league in Italy, and build it that way where you get kind of like every country has their own league and they manage it with oversight from the NFL. So the NFL is FIFA, right, which is their goal to control American football globally. They're FIFA. They are the ones with the rules. They provide the training for referees, accreditation for referees like FIFA does for international. And then like the ENFL, England National Football League, the GNFL, the German National Football League, right? But that's what they'll kind of become. And they all feed in, and the NFL US is the top of the pyramid. Goodell and company, they just tell you, hey, here are the rules of the game. So everyone's on the same rule book. That's why soccer works. Everyone's on the same rule book. I don't care if you're in the USA or Mexico or Bangladesh. Everyone's using the same rule book. So everyone will use the same rule book as the NFL US. That's the rule book, right? And then they build it in each of these countries where they can build it up that way. And then eventually you could get an international tournament of tackle football. I don't know how that's going to look, but they could do something like that. But in the short term, for the next 5 to 10 years at least, we're probably going to see an increased footprint of American NFL teams going over to play.
Mm-hmm. It's going to take 10 to 15 years to sprout the homegrown talent that you're going to need for a league. But I think they should do like a team in Munich and a team in Berlin, a team in Paris and a team in like Marseille or Versailles, a team in London and a team in Liverpool or something, like, so that way you can generate in-country rivalry. Like, It's like, who's Manchester United's biggest rival in England? Do they have a rival in England? I don't watch
Man U? Oh, yeah. Manchester United? Yeah, Man City. That derby is legendary. First off, they're both in Manchester. It's kind of like living in Kentucky where you say, are you blue or are you red? Right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's the same in Manchester. Are you blue or are you red? Are you a Man U or a Man City fan? I mean, they want to build up the rivalries in country and build up the fan base that way for sure. And then they can worry about like a Champions League with the other European champions, right? I mean, and think about it. That's a great model that soccer uses over there. They got each country has their leagues, and they call them derbies. Like Man U, like a derby can in American football terms would be like the Packers-Bears rivalry. That'd be considered a derby. Okay, so that's what they call a rivalry, a derby. Derby week, like in Manchester, when Man U and Man City play, insane. Same thing when you go to like Milan, when those two teams that are stationed there play, or like they're just because some of these cities have two clubs, right, in the league. They get these things get heavy. So if you can create that with American football, right, and create that forever, right, and that identity that people would have with the team, then you fill the stands, and then you hopefully are bringing up a homegrown talent, and then you get people like Dorn here who say stupid stuff like this, and it is stupid stuff because I'll tell you what, dude, those guys who play the quote unquote girls sport make more money than any NFL player. These guys, like look even in the U.S., the highest paid athlete in the U.S. is, guess what? A soccer player. And that's Messi. So, I mean...
I was thinking another way that the NFL could penetrate that market. Like, I actually don't disagree with Ken the Packer fan. I think you could start the NFL Europe League again, but with, like, the first time they did it, they used American players, right? And they named the teams, and it's like, so the fans really felt like they had no connection to the Barcelona Dragons, right? But what if you let the fans of that city name the team? What if you had like where they feel like now they have a piece of it? You know what I mean?
Let's go a step further, Joe, because look we'll go to my club, Bayern Munich. They've had NFL Europe shut down 15 years ago, 20 years ago. For the last about 15 years, Bayern Munich has had a relationship with the Kansas City Chiefs, right? And there are some other clubs in Europe that have relationships with NFL franchises. Some of them because the NFL franchise owns a European soccer club, like the LA Rams own Arsenal, right? So, no, baseball players do not make more money. It's pretty close, though, I think, in the States, Eric. We'll have to double check on that, but more than American football players for sure. But let's take it a step further. Instead of the NFL, putting franchises, what about a club like Bayern Munich, who also has a basketball team, who also has a ice hockey team in Munich? What if Bayern Munich has the American football team? What if Man City ownership has the American football team? What if AC Milan or Paris Saint-Germain all have, these established soccer clubs have American football clubs?
Sort of like if the NFL like franchises it and lets the soccer clubs buy their own teams under the NFL umbrella, like
Yes.
that's actually really smart, because then like your Bayern Munich fans are gonna have that an automatic attachment to that team as well.
Yes.
Or
Well, you have
it's not
to-
an attachment; they're willing to support it because it's Bayern Munich's team.
Right. Or AC Milan's team, or
Mhm.
or whoever. And then of course you got to get you have to have, like you said, you have to have players that are from the area, so to speak. They're at least a generation away from that, right? I'm sure now they've got some kids are playing Pop Warner type football or flag football there, but how far out are you from producing on-field talent?
10 to 15 years.
Maybe 10 years. So that's what I'm saying. For the next 10 years, I think NFL fans need to kind of buckle up, and I think we'll get to a point where week 1 through 15, there's going to be a game almost every week in Europe, because the other piece of that is when they did NFL Europe, they went from like one game a year in London to a season of NFL football with these teams that, like Joe said, we put there, we named, we manned, we did everything. Here's your NFL team. Here's your American football team. Revel and enjoy. And it fell flat. Well, now if you can build talent locally and you get them used to seeing football every week, which is what putting an NFL game in Europe every week will do, right? And now you give them another 10 years or so to build talent and start gaining talent. All of a sudden you can start fielding American football teams in not just one country, but in multiple countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not just that, but if you think about it, like they're going to have an advantage in one. I mean, they have a lot to catch up on in most positions, but they're going to be kicking 75-yard field goals like it's not even a thing, dude. Like,
Well,
you know what I mean?
I don't know about that, but yeah, I mean, their field goal kickers, their place kickers should be good, right? They'll probably be like failed soccer players, but I don't know. It's interesting because look, for the NFL, this is a cash cow, right? The NFL makes a boatload of money. Every game is sold out. They make the merchandising sales. I'd like to see what their merchandising sale numbers are for a game in Europe versus a game in the States. You know what I'm saying? Like right now, I'm sure it's pretty lopsided. You know, at some point it'll even out because people can only buy so much crap. But just like they're making so much money. Why would the NFL? Why would the NFL stop putting games over there? Like,
Yeah,
seriously,
no. Ultimately, the goal should be a Europe league, and then you have like I see. I actually agree with Ken. I think like you have the AFL, or let's say the NFL and the EFL, like the European League, and then like the European League has their own Super Bowl. The NFL has their own Super Bowl, and then the winners like face off in a neutral location like Sao Paulo or something, so that there's not the perception of favoritism. And
you could I don't know how that would work though, Joe, because like especially with the NFLPA, who already bitched that there are 17 games and the league wants to go to 18 games, and now you want to add an international game, like a international Super Bowl or tournament, like So okay, the way it works in soccer, it's broken up by regions, right? And the UEFA Cup is the most famous. CONCACAF is going on right now, or the FIFA World Cup is going on right now. And you get all these other tournaments, right? But UEFA would say like the Champions League, right? And you take like the top 3 from each country, they qualify and they play this tournament that's concurrent with their normal seasons, right? Like normally game day for them is Saturday, which also works for the NFL because we play on Sunday. So they play their matches on Saturday, but they'll have like a Wednesday game, which will be a Champions League game, right? I don't know how the NFL, you couldn't do that, right? It would have to be after the regular season, but who wants to play another 4 or 5 games after the Super Bowl in this tournament after that long season? I mean, fans, we would love it, right? We get more games, but the player, NFLPA, and that's so far down the road for them. I mean, that's probably 20 years, 30 years down the road. Who knows if we'd be alive to see it? But because you'd have to, you're expanding the season then for like, the AFC and NFC.
But I'm not talking
today.
about 5-game tournament though. I'm talking about a single game after the Super Bowl, and both sides, like, they have their playoffs, they have their Super Bowl, and then it's one game: the winner of the European League versus the winner of the
I guess
Super Bowl.
if you did a European league like the old NFL Europe, where it's not like England has their own league, Germany has their league, but there's one big league between all those nations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could see that, so that's the other question though. Does the NFL go towards an NFL Europe model like they had before, where you have one league in Europe with maybe upwards of 16 teams or so spread out over 5 to 6 countries, or do you have where Germany, Spain, Italy, they all have their own leagues? Which do you do? Do you go to like a La Liga, Bundesliga, Premier League, where every country has their own, or do you have a European league?
I think you go where the biggest soccer teams are, and you put teams there. Like, forget about leagues and just say, like, which are the biggest soccer cities, right? Like, Milan is a big soccer city, Munich is a big soccer city, like, and then you also hit capitals, right? Like, you got to have London, you got to have Berlin, like Barcelona would be good, Paris would be good, but I don't think you're limited to just European countries. You could also go into like Norway or Sweden. You could, there's the northern European countries that you could go into also.
Can you imagine a December game in Norway?
That's what I'm saying. The home field advantage is real.
Holy shit. Hold on. If we have a team up there, does that mean Minnesota will have to change their team name?
The Norway Vikings.
I was going to say it fits a lot better that way.
The Oslo Vikings. Ooh.
If the league seasons were to match up, preseason could be interesting because you could have preseason games where the England Knights are playing, or the London Knights are playing the New York Giants in a preseason game. I mean, that could be kind of cool. But I mean, there's a lot of different ways. But I mean, the short term, I just think we're going to see more games in Europe. I honestly think the NFL is going to keep this expansion into Europe rolling by putting more product on the field there and expanding the youth programs and the Play 60 programs and eventually Pop Warner programs. And I'm just wondering, at what point do they start trying to put a team in Europe permanently? Because the thought has to cross their mind that, hey, we got some NFL teams that maybe struggle a little bit. Jacksonville used to be one of them. That, but if we put Jacksonville and London per se, they'd sell out every game. And so I'm wondering, at what point do they maybe say, hey, we're just gonna throw a team over there on a more permanent basis?
I think you have to change the name of the team, though. If the Jaguars go to London, they can no longer be the London Jaguars. Like, I actually think the London Knights
that would actually fit, considering they make Jaguar in London.
Yeah, maybe, but I think the London Knights would be. It sounds cooler.
Yeah, the London Knights versus the New England Patriots. That sounds like popcorn material right there. Yeah. I think you'd finally find a way to get all of America rooting for the Patriots.
Yeah, no shit.
And all of England rooting for the Knights too.
But look, would we all agree that this is probably at least 10 years out?
Oh, absolutely. Bare minimum.
So between now and then, I think they're going to get to a point where it's maybe 15 games a year in Europe.
I was going to say, that seriously wouldn't shock me.
Luke is like, he ain't rooting for New England.
It's kind of a good sign, though, because like the NFL is not stupid. Like, the fact that they keep upping the number of games in Europe every year means that they feel like they're getting a foothold there. Like, if they weren't getting a foothold, they wouldn't be wasting their money to send teams over there to play. Like, they feel like they're making progress.
I really hate this argument. Oh, the NFL players don't like to go to Europe. Really? Are you sure about that? More than a few of them kind of enjoy going to Europe.
I was going to say, you got guys that are speaking out on both sides of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. It's like, look, guys, it's going to happen. The NFL,
you're going to love it or you're going to hate it as a player.
Yeah, and look, the NFL is making tons of money, so they're going to continue to do it. And the games are good. And this will be interesting to see what happens with the Vikings this year. They're spending 2 weeks over there, right? They're playing in Ireland, in Cork, and then they're playing in London the next week. I think they'll probably pick a location that they can call home for 2 weeks, and because it's only like an hour and a half flight from Dublin to London. So they may just stay in Dublin for the whole 2 weeks and then fly into London for the game from Dublin before they go, play the game and go home. Darren, of course, then goes, well, what about Canada? Well, what about Canada? I don't think Toronto gets an NFL team. I think at some point the CFL, look at the CFL is pretty big in Canada. And I know we got some Canadians that watch. So please, Canadians,
Yeah, I was going to say, from what I saw when I was going to Canada, the CFL, yeah, they kind of like it, but a lot of them followed the NFL more. If they were watching CFL, they were watching the NFL too.
Toronto wouldn't get a team because Buffalo would be like, oh, hell no. Because they consider that their market, right? So they consider that their market, and they probably got a lot of fans that come from the Canadian side.
I was going to say a lot of teams have parts of Canada carved out for markets. They would just have to redo that and take those markets away.
It's the same link it always is. It doesn't change. You'd have to go to cities that probably don't have a market share rate. Like Detroit has a market share in Canada. Buffalo has a market share in Canada. Seattle has a market share in Canada. You
have to go to like Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Saskatoon.
Look, is it possible for the CFL to maybe merge into the NFL at some point? That could be possible. Even though the Grey Cup is older than look at the Grey Cup is the oldest American football trophy in football.
Yeah, but
so I don't know. Their league's been around longer than the NFL too. So I don't know if that would ever happen, but I could see them start changing the rules to mirror American football more at some point, right? I think you could see some of that, but
if I'm the NFL, I say fuck them. I go into Canada and I start planning franchises because the NFL has never been about like being partners with somebody. Like they want to unless their name is on it, right? Like if it's competition, Europe,
I think Europe they plant their flag there and they grow it, and then it kind of gives them more ammo to go into Canada. To be honest with you, look at right now, you've got low hanging fruit in Europe, which is there's no competition. You can dominate the space. There's no competition for what you produce. In Canada, you've got competition. You've got the CFL, right? So why would you go compete against the CFL when you don't have to? And you can
because I don't necessarily know if the NFL would consider the CFL competition.
Yeah, I honestly believe that if I get that Canadians like Canadian Football League, but it's only because that's what they got. If you were to plant a franchise in Toronto, a franchise in Montreal, and a franchise in like Vancouver, for example, you're going to see all those fan bases, they're going to go straight to the NFL team.
And Mexico City getting a team, well, they're not even playing games in Mexico City right now because of security concerns. Mexico is an interesting situation as far as putting NFL franchises there, because you can make a good argument for it too. That really that'd be a great country to expand into, more so than Canada, because you have, once again, no other league to fight against. You have an wide open market that you could dominate. But you got to do.
And Mexican fans are just as rabid as European fans are.
Yeah, they are.
They're passionate about their sport.
They were really building something in Mexico with the Mexico City games, and it's usually the Raiders who went out there.
And the Cowboys.
And they were building something, but then the situation's just become, a security nightmare for them, because I could have seen them going out to the Yucatan, putting a team like in maybe, well, not Cozumel, but Cancun, right across the water from them. You could have put a team in Cancun. You could have put one
Guadalajara.
City, Guadalajara. Puerto Vallarta could have gotten one. Some tourist destinations would have been great for teams. But I think right now the security situation in Mexico and the drug cartel situation in Mexico has scared the NFL off, because why would you want to mess with that?
Can you imagine you got like the Guadalajara Banditos? That'd be dope.
I mean, as far as NFL expansion, like adding teams to the NFL, Canada and Mexico make the most sense, obviously. But I think right now the focus is growing the game in Europe and eventually in the next decade or so putting some franchises down and getting a league in Europe.
What's up there, Woody?
Morning Wood.
And here we are with our new show, Driving with a Woody.
Yeah, no, I'm behind a cement truck and he doesn't know how to fucking turn.
I mean, Isaiah, you're not wrong, man. It's all about the money. The NFL is making it hand over fist in Europe right now.
Fist.
Hand over fist.
Oh, woo! Kind of scared me there, Ken.
Yeah, Mexico. Look at here's the problem with putting a team in Mexico City. The NFL is concerned about teams going there for 1 week to play, let alone players living there for a season.
Oh yeah, you'd have to contract a paramilitary group just to sit outside and be the security.
Oh, that wouldn't help you
For a little while. But see, if you could grow homegrown players, at least a good portion of them on the team, then it wouldn't be that way because Mexico treats their athletes very well.
If you put a team in Mexico City, the assumption there is that a Mexico City team would be in the NFL proper. It's not Europe. Like anything you would do in Canada or Mexico would be part of NFL proper. So they'd be an expansion team to the NFC or AFC West, per se, let's say. So you put a team in Mexico City, they'd go in the NFC West, right? And then you put maybe a Canadian team in the AFC. I mean, and I think that's how they would – I don't think they'd try to give Canada – well, Canada doesn't need their own league. They've already got one. And I don't think they'd try to create a league in Mexico. They would just – because they would probably just try to put teams in Mexico. Or maybe get
right, but I'm not saying create a league. What I'm saying is if you put a team in Mexico City, there's already fans there that like football. Well, there's going to be kids who are going to start playing football because they want to play for the Mexico City whatever.
Well, yeah, because there are Mexican players in the team. There are already players of Mexican descent in the NFL.
Right. And there's a few of them. So I expect that especially if you put a team there, I expect that number to grow.
You got to put Toronto in the AFC East. That way you got the rivalry with the Bears, or not the Bears, the Bills.
Yeah, it's probably going to East. Yeah, Darren, it'd still be East, West, North. Obviously, go in the South. But
are they talking about? Are they talking about making a team in Mexico City, or are you guys just out of topics?
No, we're talking about expansion.
Number 2.
We're talking about expansion because I mean, look, they added 2 more games to Europe this year. The Vikings are playing 2 weeks back to back in Europe in 2 different countries. They're expanding their international slate. So the question is, at what point where's the NFL going with this? Are we going to get 15 regular seasons a year in Europe, and then are they going to look at maybe putting teams in Canada and Mexico as expansion teams in the NFL at some point? Like, where's the NFL going with all this expansion besides making tons of money?
Well, they were
Sicily. That's where their next team will be.
There you go, Woody. That's what
they were already talking about it. They already they were pretty much. They almost had a name for the team and everything. They were ready to put an expansion team in Mexico, and then the security concerns made them have to step back from those plans. But
I don't know. Utah just has a hockey team now, so that might build something there too. Wherever they're going to fucking play up there, those Mormons.
The Salt Lake City Mormons.
Yeah, yep. See, Darren, Buffalo, I think, has a problem with Toronto putting an NFL franchise because it's right there. That's where it gets problematic. The Bills will have it's like putting an NFL franchise in Orlando. Why doesn't it happen? Because basically Tampa and Jacksonville say, "Oh hell no, it's too close." More Tampa, it's only like an hour away. They don't like being that close because it's market share. Toronto. And market share, if you put an NFL franchise in Toronto, they're sharing the market share with the Bills. And it's hard for them to put an NFL franchise, I think, in Toronto initially. But I think if the NFL wants it, they're going to tell Buffalo, suck it up, cupcake. There is a franchise going there. But Buffalo might be saying, hey, look, 25% of our fan base comes from Toronto. That's way too much money. So that's a good question to ask Jamie Malloy maybe tonight. on Driving to the Top on their show tonight is, hey, what's the fan base for Buffalo look like in Toronto? Like, how big is it? Because the market share drives the train, even with NFL expansion. If you want to put a team in Salt Lake, what NFL franchise is going to complain about a team in Salt Lake? No one, because that's no one's market share. No one's got a massive amount of fans from Salt Lake City that roots for them in the NFL right now, right? So you could put an NFL franchise in Salt Lake, and you're not stealing from Vegas. You're not stealing from the Niners. You're not stealing from Seattle. They're far enough away. St. Louis is the same way. The Bears don't care. It's a 5-hour drive. It's not like it's right next door. The team that's probably closest to the Titans or Kansas City, I'm sorry, the Chiefs, and that's still, the Chiefs don't care. I mean, the market share is a big thing in the NFL. So Toronto doesn't work for that reason, because the Bills, because I know they've already talked about it, and the Bills every time are like, not just no, but hell no. The Salt Lake City Flakes.
Oh my goodness, Fred! I'm telling you, it's going to be the Mormon.
I want to see, John. You need to show us
the Mormons.
The NFL is losing fans. Please show us that, because right now the NFL is they are gaining fans all over the place, and there are a couple people in the States who are mad they're going to Europe. Big fucking deal. They're adding tens of thousands of fans in Europe. So those couple hundred people who are pissed off because they're playing games in Europe, NFL's like, whatever, dude, we're replacing you.
Nah, we're gonna say you still don't want to piss off your core fan base, because a lot of those guys would be your guys.
Look what they did with the flag kneel and all that. They pissed off half the country, and they didn't care. They still did it. They still play the black national anthem, even though it pisses off half the fan base. They still do lots of things that piss off the fan base, but guess what? The fans watch.
They literally had a whole campaign of commercials where they said football is gay, and nobody's. I'm not even joking. They literally did that. You didn't see the commercial?
I mean, the NFL,
if they can get away with that, like,
who had that? Who did that? Who did that commercial?
It wasn't one commercial. It was a series of commercials where they had NFL players.
Oh, so it wasn't just Lance from NSYNC.
No, they had a full campaign like a couple years ago when Carl Nassib came out as gay. Like, they had a full campaign that like football is gay. Like, I swear, I was like, I saw the commercial, I was like, are they calling us gay? Like,
I'm a big Devils fan in hockey and stuff like that, and they have I think it's every team that's in the NHL that they have Pride Night.
They do. They don't. The
What's
NHL.
That?
Gary Bateman is probably, I would say, he's one of the best commissioners in pro sports. So they changed it in the NHL. It was mandatory, like in every league at first, and the NHL said, you know what? If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. So while they still have a Pride Night, it's not mandatory.
Yeah, because I go to about 19 to 20 Devils games a year, and because my cousin works there, and I couldn't get tickets for this one game, and Jody decided to get me tickets, and it was for Pride Night. So she started laughing at me. I'm like, "You're a fucking asshole." But anyway, it's all. I think it should be in every sport, really, not just NHL.
Yeah, the not making it mandatory piece. That's why Bateman. I mean, every commissioner gets booed, but Bateman has done more to grow the NHL than I mean, he's been in that job for 30 years, man. The NHL has grown exponentially. It's huge now, and the NFL is still the NFL is making money hand over fist. They're expanding markets. They're making more money now than they've ever made before. John's like, well, they're losing fans, but they're still packing stadiums. They're still selling merch. I mean, the impact of them losing some fans, like Dorn's saying, is they don't even care because they're making more money now than they've ever made before. So that argument, they don't care because fans are replaceable and fans come back, right? And they're going to keep this expansion of Pride because it makes them money. And as long as, though, I think what Ken said, though, early on about the novelty in Europe, as long as they can continue packing stadiums in Europe, as they keep adding more and more games, if they go 4 years from now and they got 12 games a year in Europe, and now they're having a hard time selling tickets, they'll slow up. They've given themselves a good probably 10 to 15 years to grow a league there with some homegrown talent and guys who don't make the NFL, of course, and get American fans and American players used to making the trip over. They're going to do something, whether it's a league or straight up expansion into Europe with NFL franchises. They're doing something over there. The writing's on the wall, but the question is going to be, what is it going to be? Where is the NFL going to expand, and how are they going to expand? Are they going to, try to put a team in Mexico? Are they going to try to put teams in Canada, or are they going to keep doing this European thing? And then they're starting off with Sao Paulo, and they're going to Australia. I think those are just money grabs. Those games are just money grabs. The focus is Europe.
Who said the NFL was losing fans?
Dorn.
Holy fuck!
Yeah.
I want to see where he knows that from, or heard that
he said
from.
just look it up, because he's not providing the numbers of that. He's just saying we have to go do the homework for him. They're making more money now than they've made. Look at it. So some Green Bay fans, some Bears fans, whatever, like, oh, I'm not going to watch anymore. They don't care. Fans are replaceable, man. They know that. Oh, Jesus. Darren keeps coming up with team names for these European or these outside the U.S. He doesn't watch golf. He's just kidding. We lost Woody. Heard a weird noise and we lost Woody. Maybe he's in a bridge. Woody try not to get a Woody while driving. No, look, I mean, Ken, I think you're right, though, what you said about the novelty. If we're doing 8 games in Europe, if they have a hard time start to selling, then maybe the novelty argument you made early starts to come out. But I think they're looking to try to get 15 games a year there to see if they can sell out 15 games a year and then get that in. And then you do that for a couple years and maintain success, and you start growing the Pop Warner and club, and you start getting European clubs, like Joe said, to buy in. Like Bayern, like Milan, AC Milan, like Barca, and they start getting their own American football teams. Because remember, they do that they don't draft from the colleges, they do the academies. And then they'll start getting American football academies over, and all of a sudden there'll be a European football league. I think it's going, and the NFL is going to be the one making the money on it, because it'll be like, franchised out, where those leagues will send money back to the U.S. or that league. Arizona Cardinals, the Arizona Cardinals, were in St. Louis for God, how long? I don't know if they'll ever relocate. Arizona, man, you got to feel for them. They've already lost their hockey team. I think the D-backs aren't really. Yeah, they got the D-backs and they got the Cardinals, and that's it.
And they got the Suns.
And they got the Suns. Yeah, that's right. The Suns. Can't forget about them. Yeah, I don't know, boys. I mean, what do you think next year? Is it next year they're going to Australia?
Yep.
And we're adding Paris and Australia next year? 2 more international games. That's not going to happen. I don't think the NFL is going to put 2 teams in a city anymore if they can expand to new cities.
But you have the Giants and the Jets, right? Like,
right. And LA's
I think
got
Chicago's a big enough city but Chicago's a big enough city that you could theoretically have 2 teams there.
Well, it could. You could have 2 teams in Chicago. It's a big enough city like New York or LA. It's a 3rd populous city in the country. Sure, it has the market, but I think the NFL would much rather put a team in Toronto or Mexico City or Vancouver than put a second team in a city that already has a franchise.
There's also talk about San Antonio.
Yeah.
San Antonio's been begging for a franchise for a long time.
Yeah, put another team in Texas. Orlando wants a team. That's why they put the Pro Bowl in Orlando, to test it out. Orlando's wanted a team for a while. I don't think that U.S. expansion's always there, But I don't think that's where the NFL's eyes are. And youth camps would be crucial for Europe. They would produce elite talent because of the laws. Yeah, man. That's another thing, too. The laws in Europe with the way they do that, these academies, like the U.S. can't replicate it in soccer. Could you imagine what American football players in an academy-like system, basically what the academies are? So, Ken, at like 9 years old, you start playing academy football with your club. Let's say you live in Munich. So you would actually go to school at the club, and you get your civilian education and football together. It's kind of like what's the academy they have there in Tampa? That sports academy. You know what I'm talking about? They always make the news for the wrong reasons. They tried that in the U.S. Where basically these kids. There's a couple of these academies in the States for sports. There's one for track even. It's a high school. There's one in Florida, and if anyone knows the name. But you basically it's a sports high school, and it's kind of trying to replicate the European model and to create better athletes to come out of high school to go to college. See, we solved the college thing. IMG, thank you, Luca. IMG's in Florida, and like you got all these kids, they go there. It's kind of like they're not. It's obviously not a public school. It costs a lot to go there, so parents are paying money. But they're supposedly bringing in these coaches and NFL systems and this, that, and the other, and supposedly creating elite football talent at the high school level to go to college and on to the pros. Well, that's a European model across the board for soccer, hockey, everything. They do these academies. So could you imagine if you get these kids, they eat, live, sleep football. That's all they do. And they get their math and their English classes. So if the Europeans were to use that model for American football, could you imagine some of the elite talent they could create out of there?
I think it sort of like shortens the curve, like as far as how long it would take to build talent. Like since they already have the infrastructure, they already have everything in place. If they were to, or as far as how to run those academies and stuff, like if they were to just build some football academies and stuff, like it could cut the time to produce talent way down, right? Instead of 15 years, now you could do it in 5 to 7 years. Like
I think though that comes into what you said, Joe, about getting established European soccer clubs to buy in, though, because they're the ones with the infrastructure, right? So Arsenal is a great target in England because they're owned by the LA Rams. The ownership group that owns the Rams owns Arsenal. So for them to start an academy over there, they already know American football, right? Within their ownership group, they're a great target. Bayern Munich's had an agreement with the Kansas City Chiefs for a decade plus. I think if they start doing that, we're going to start to see the growth of a European football league, and one day it could rival the NFL. And I think in the NFL, like you got Oklahoma City, San Antonio, you got Canada, you can always look to expand into, and Mexico if the situation improves there. A lot of expansion for the NFL. I mean, the NFL's got a lot of room to grow, and I know we didn't talk about it. We hinted at it, and I wanted to spend the day kind of talking about it because it's there, and we're seeing the effects of it in our schedules. Once again, look at Minnesota this year. We're starting to see the effects. And next year, we're getting 2 more additional games. It's not going away. It's present. As much as like John Doran hates it, it's not going away because the NFL makes way too much money. So where's this all going? Because at some point they want to make more than just putting a game or two, over. Like I said, I think at one point they want 15 games a year outside the continental U.S.
I'll tell you where this is going. In 25 years, we're going to have the Baghdad jihadis.
Oh, Jesus. I don't know if we'll get that far, but I mean, look, it's Canadian hockey teams buying. Darren, Canadian hockey teams can't even win a Stanley Cup, let alone an NFL championship, please. No, I mean, the Canadian Football League is the roadblock to Canada and market share like Buffalo and stuff like that. But darn, they don't care. So they lose 10 American fans and gain 100 European fans. They don't care, John. That point of view, John, I hate to say this, and on this final point, except that the NFL is doing stuff with Europe, and they're going to keep sending teams there whether you like it or not, because they're making money, and they're making more money now than they've made ever. And as long as they keep making money, they're going to do it. They don't care that fans are upset about them playing in Europe, just like they weren't upset about the Black Lives Matter stuff and the flag stuff and the gay pride stuff and any of that. So just take that and think about it for a moment. On that note, JB's up next. We'll be back tomorrow morning, not talking expansion. Thanks for the comments, everyone. Thanks to everyone who's on the show. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.